Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about how it's seeming like we are about to enter a new golden age of 3D Zelda. And this may entail a variety of things, but the big thing, the beginning of it, reportedly is going to be The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time remake. You may have heard some conversations about this already. I've been talking about it a lot. I've been theorizing about it for years. There's been a lot of evidence to support it, and now various outlets are reporting that this is indeed what is the plan for this specific year, for this holiday, for Zelda's 40th anniversary. Nate the Hate put out his podcast, Video Games Chronicle heard the same thing from their own sources, Nintendo has been teasing this for a while since December that some kind of Zelda remake is on the way. We've heard things from Special Nick as well. This was rumored a while back by Nash Weedle, but now the consensus seems to be amongst most major outlets that this is indeed one of Nintendo's big plans for this year, a full remake for Ocarina of Time. But we have even more details about this project that are suggesting Nintendo's overall plan for the 40th anniversary, but perhaps what may go even beyond that here. I'm starting to think, and actually I've been thinking about this before the reports, that this Ocarina of Time remake is going to be one of many big projects in the future that's going to be a new era for Zelda where we're going to see some pretty consistent 3D Zelda projects, and it's going to be a very, very good time. So what exactly appears to be going down here? Well, that's what we're diving into today. But here's a brief reminder that I have this goal, so if you find yourself enjoying my videos, I would very much appreciate your support, subscribing if you haven't already. So a couple days ago, I already covered that Special Nick put out that he had heard back in 2024 that this Ocarina of Time remake is going to have a pretty big budget, which is exciting and is suggestive that we're looking at something here that's not just a remaster, but something that's at least visually impressive, perhaps more, perhaps something along the lines of a Resident Evil 2, 3, or 4 remake, or perhaps even closer to what we've seen in Square Enix's Final Fantasy VII remake games. When you consider that we're also hearing that 3D Mario won't be coming out until next year, and that Pokemon Winds and Waves has already been confirmed officially to not be coming out until next year, it has you wondering, what would Nintendo be putting out for the holiday that's still early on to the Switch 2 generation, where they would need something really big? As you've been theorizing for many years, given that Tears of the Kingdom came out in 2023, the only realistic way Nintendo could have an ambitious, significant Zelda release to bring in the Zelda fanbase and help with those early on Switch 2 sales would be for a full remake with a pretty big budget. And so it gives me a lot of optimism here that this remake is going to be special, and it's perhaps going to be the lead title, the top title, the biggest title from Nintendo this year. But while this title may be the key to Zelda's 40th anniversary, it looks like there's going to be more than just that, and this is going to be the beginning for something even more special. So Special Nick actually had a follow-up to what he mentioned about the pretty big budget, as he says here. As a follow-up to the below, from what I've been told, we are getting a Zelda-themed limited edition Switch 2 console. Not sure if the game will be bundled or not. And so, right here, he's already adding something else to the pot for what we're thinking we may see for Zelda's 40th anniversary, a Switch 2 Zelda bundle. I'm sure many Zelda fans are going to eat that up. That's going to contribute to some strong Switch 2 sales this holiday, alongside the release for the big remake. And I would say with these two things alone, we're already looking at a pretty nice celebration for Zelda's 40th anniversary. But let's remind ourselves that the live-action Zelda movie is coming out next year for May, which means they probably will need to start marketing the movie with like actual trailers later this year, probably close to the time when this Ocarina of Time remake would be coming out and this special Switch 2 Zelda bundle. And so there's also going to be live-action Zelda movie marketing, very similar to how we've seen the Mario Galaxy movie be a pivotal piece, the centerpiece actually, to Mario's 40th anniversary. Now some of you might be wondering, well, is this going to be the only Zelda game we would be getting this year? And I'll point out from this same source here, Special Nick, he has mentioned he's heard there are going to be Amiibos for Zelda and Luigi's Mansion this year. And maybe that's just for the Ocarina of Time remake. That could involve multiple different characters getting new Amiibos. But perhaps there could be more than that. I've talked about this before, but I think it's highly relevant here. And that's the Wind Waker Twilight Princess HD ports. On the Wii U, Nintendo put out HD remasters for both The Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, and fans have been calling for these to come to Switch 1 pretty much the entire generation, and there were reports that they were done and ready to go, but they never came out. And the only thing that has made sense to me to explain why they may have been done and ready to come out, but Nintendo has simply sat on them, would be maybe because they are saving them for a particular moment in time, very similar to what we've seen how Nintendo has handled Mario Galaxy 2. If you remember, back in 2020 for the 35th anniversary, many people felt like it was a real head-scratcher that Galaxy 2 was not included in 3D All-Stars. My theory was that they were saving Galaxy 2 for the next Mario movie that would feature Yoshi, which would also work really well to release Mario Galaxy 2 that also features Yoshi, which is literally what happened. And so my thinking here is that perhaps the reason why we haven't seen Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD yet is because they've been saving them for the 40th anniversary to help push the iconic green tunic Link, give people different games to enjoy for the 40th anniversary, and help market the live-action Zelda movie. Now, at what point do we see these? Maybe they could come out this year before the big Ocarina of Time remake. Maybe they could come out next year to give us a little bit of something else Zelda in 2027. These are both possibilities, but I would say if we do not see them announced once Nintendo has concluded all their 40th anniversary plans for Zelda, that the idea of a Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD should be completely ruled out. Now, we've heard from a Nintendo executive, Nate Bildorf, that the inclusion of the Wind Waker in Nintendo Classics does not rule out the possibility that Nintendo could remaster or remake it in the future. But I do think seeing the Wind Waker added to GameCube Classics does diminish the chances of it showing up relatively soon. So that's more reason to be skeptical that we might see Wind Waker and Twilight Princess this year. Unless we're talking about Twilight Princess just being added to Nintendo Classics. And there's actually another reason why they may not come this year. And that's because perhaps Nintendo is thinking about doing something a bit different with their 3D Zelda projects. No longer are they porting or doing these very simple, low-budget remasters, but they're moving on to something far bigger. And I'll get to that in a moment, but I do just want to mention that I still think there's a pretty good possibility we could see some kind of 2D Zelda release, if not this year, next year as well. Maybe this year we're getting the big 3D Zelda remake, and next year we get some kind of 2D Zelda offering. I don't think we should be ruling that out, so I'm just putting that out there. But getting back to this idea that Nintendo might be repurposing Wind Waker and Twilight Princess and other Zelda games in the future, we heard something else about this Ocarina of Time remake. So, during Nintendo Prime's podcast a couple nights ago, Special Nick came in during the live stream, and they were having a conversation about the Ocarina of Time remake. And Special Nick said this: "All I can say is that it's an external developer co-developing with an internal team." Which I find very interesting because a few months back I was theorizing that this is probably what's going on, that if this Ocarina of Time remake were to be happening, it would be a collaborative effort, because you don't want to have the entire 3D Zelda team, the team that will be working on the follow-up to Tears of the Kingdom, all hands on deck on this Ocarina of Time remake project, because it would kind of defeat the purpose here. Part of the purpose is to get out this remake while they are still making that next big Zelda game that would come out just a few years later. You don't want to delay that process, but what you want to do is put out this remake to tide us over until that time comes. And so you need to get other people involved. But Nick here is saying it's a combination of internal and external. Now, what I have to speculate on here, because a lot of people mix this up or word things a little bit differently, Monolith Soft is wholly owned by Nintendo, but some people still look at Monolith Soft as external, even though it is 100% a Nintendo studio. And Monolith Soft has been responsible for helping out with a lot of big Nintendo projects, not just the Xenoblade games, but they've also done support work for Animal Crossing, Splatoon, and the last few generations of 3D Zelda, Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom. No doubt they're also helping out with the next brand new 3D Zelda, the next Open Air Zelda as well. But if we are talking about an ambitious remake here, Monolith Soft might be heavily involved with this too. In fact, we actually had an interview from just a few short months ago And this is literally on Monolith Soft's actual website, where they were having an interview between the Zelda team and Monolith Soft. And here it said by Iwamoto, "We want Monolith Soft to take on more and more core roles as a strong partner in creating Zelda from the ground up. Based on the know-how we've cultivated while working together so far, let's further enhance the overall team strength at Monolith Soft and continue to create unique series titles together in the future." And so it appears the implication here is that Nintendo and the Zelda team want Monolith Soft to take on even more of a role with Zelda. And what I find fascinating about this, and to be clear, I don't necessarily want this to be the case, but I did put out a video talking about the possibility that perhaps the Ocarina of Time remake project has been in the works by Monolith Soft, and their codename project that we heard leaked. There was a lot of Nintendo codename projects that were leaked by Midori, several of which have already been confirmed, leading myself and many others to believe that the last few are also likely true, including Project Legacy, said to be in the works by Monolith Soft. That this Legacy project could maybe be, instead of this new IP they've supposedly been hiring for many years, is actually the Ocarina of Time remake, or perhaps they are one and the same. I mean, they did have these recruitment pages up with this art, and both of which are very Zelda-centric, and to be clear, this is separate from their recruitment page for The Legend of Zelda. Two very different things. Yet, we do know they were recruiting for people to work on a project that would have action elements and would have a fantasy medieval setting, and the art they shared, albeit this is like 8 or 9 years ago, had clear similarities to Zelda, even very arguably actual Zelda symbolism. And so while I'm not 100% certain that Monolith Soft is the sole developer here, I think it's pretty darn likely that Monolith Soft is heavily involved with this Ocarina of Time remake project. But it is also interesting to hear that Nick is saying an external team could be involved here, and maybe that's not just Monolith Soft, because technically Monolith Soft is a part of internal Nintendo. And so who could be that other developer? Well, Grezzo finished Echoes of Wisdom in 2024, so perhaps they are helping out. We do have reason to believe that Echoes of Wisdom was actually done in advance, so it's not too much of a stretch to think that Grezzo could have been helping out with this remake project for already a few years. If they aren't the main developer, but simply offering some support work, then perhaps it's a little bit more reasonable. But I personally like the possibility that maybe this external developer is someone out of left field that Nintendo found would be a good partner for this project, and perhaps this combination of developers could lead to a new beginning here. This new beginning being a team that can now focus on projects like this, while you still have a team like Grezzo focusing on 2D Zelda, and you still have the main 3D Zelda team focusing on those Open Air Zelda projects. And so what we could be looking at here is an era of Zelda where you have 3 different teams making different Zelda games, so there's a lot more consistency with releases. A big issue that I've talked about before regarding 3D Zelda is that the development times between each mainline new 3D Zelda have been getting longer and longer for several generations now. It's not getting shorter, it's only getting longer, and I think waiting 8 years for every 3D Zelda is kind of a huge problem. That's not good for business, that's not good for keeping the brand relevant. And I'm not saying we need a Zelda game every single year, not a mainline one. I do think we need them to come out with a bit more consistency than every 6 to 8 years. And so going back to this idea that this is more of an ambitious remake, something along the lines of what Capcom has done with the Resident Evil games, or something along the lines of what Square Enix has done with the Final Fantasy games, you look at their development pipelines and what's been coming out consistently, Resident Evil and Final Fantasy, you're getting a lot of high quality, Game of the Year candidate kind of games coming out very consistently from both series here. And it's because they have different teams working on different projects. You have teams working on the remake projects, and you have teams working on the brand new mainline titles. And so they're not rushing out games, they're taking their time with their games, they're very good games, but they have enough teams working on different projects, so we're seeing consistency come up for these series, and both series are seeing some great success here. I gotta imagine Nintendo's at least observed that, and has at least considered the possibility that they might want to do something similar here So when we're hearing that this Ocarina of Time remake project is being made by a combination of an external and internal team, this could become the new framework for other Zelda remakes in the future. This Ocarina of Time remake may become the new standard of remake from Nintendo. Like, my anticipation here is that this is literally going to be the most ambitious, exciting remake we've ever seen come out from Nintendo. And it's also why I understand some people are maybe not so excited about this idea, because they look at a lot of prior remakes and remasters from Nintendo and they think it's going to be something simpler. But the idea behind this is to be the big holiday title. That's a suggestion from the report so far. We'll see, of course, maybe there's something else involved there. But without Mario, without Pokemon, Animal Crossing is not coming out anytime soon because we just got the Animal Crossing update. And Smash is likely not coming out anytime soon because Sakurai was busy with Kirby Air Riders, which just came out a few short months ago. Realistically, the only way Nintendo can get out a big, awesome title this year is making sure this Ocarina of Time remake is a fairly ambitious project. And to be clear, I'm talking about something that has like that 20+ million copies sales potential here. I'm sure Nintendo could fit in other things like maybe a Luigi's Mansion 4. We've heard about Star Fox and stuff like that, and that's all gonna be really good, but to have that premier title that has that kind of enormous sales potential, I think it's gotta be this. And so when this happens, I do believe it opens the door for others. What comes out after the Ocarina of Time remake? Well, I would assume a few years later we'll get the next actual new 3D Zelda. I mentioned possibly a 2D Zelda in between. But then after that, a couple years later, once it's been about 4-ish years, then maybe we can start talking about the Majora's Mask remake coming out. And then when that happens, Nintendo can then look at the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess and remake those. We look at that 2011 Wii U tech demo. That's how Twilight Princess in theory could have looked for the Wii U on a smaller scale, but now with Switch 2, which is far more powerful hardware, on a larger scale, they could definitely pull that off. Of course, by the time we would maybe be seeing this Twilight Princess remake, we might be talking about it coming out for Switch 3, but maybe we're talking about it coming out late Switch 2 era or early Switch 3 era here. And we would have already gotten an Open Air 3D Zelda, a 2D Zelda, this Ocarina of Time remake, which is supposedly coming out this year, and a Majora's Mask remake. And then Nintendo can keep going here. This will allow us to see mainline Zelda titles perhaps every 2 years or so, with spin-offs in between and things of that nature. So it wouldn't be oversaturating, it wouldn't be rushing out these projects would be high quality, getting the time they need, but there would be consistency, it will be epic, it'll be awesome, it'll be a new golden age for Zelda, specifically 3D Zelda. That's the idea. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.